All right, welcome to church history class. So this is going to be our new style of lecture videos. And I have my friend Father Brad here with me that we're going to have a conversation. So maybe it's not just me talking to you, but it'll be the two of us kind of chatting about a topic and then also talking to you about those things. So we're going to start out with section 1 of chapter 7, which we've already talked about a little bit in class, but I just wanted to give you the video version since I won't be there with you to talk about section 1, Catholic social teaching. Okay, so we're going to talk about in this section basically the 1800s through today. The church's social teaching is starting sort of at the end of the 1800s in reaction to the Industrial Revolution. So, and then continuing through today, talking about economics, politics, social concerns, different things that people are dealing with, particularly having to do with everyday life, work, those things. So
religion, politics, basically Thanksgiving dinner.
Yes, sure. Okay.
You know how it's like awkward to bring up politics?
I didn't know where you were going for a minute with Thanksgiving dinner, and then I was like, oh.
Like
yes,
your uncle.
You're not supposed to talk about politics and religion. So yes, politics and religion. Welcome to Thanksgiving dinner. Okay, so first thing is Industrial Revolution. So describe the Industrial Revolution.
Okay. Industrial Revolution is a time period in the world's history whenever our technology was advancing so quickly that we were able to create things and to manufacture things. Basically, think of the factory. Think of a factory. Like assembly lines, people working in small little tasks to put together a really big thing. Machinery, a lot of smoke, like billowing from buildings.
I picture like like pictures of London in the 1800s where it's just like smog and smoke and everything in the atmosphere, and you see all the little like chimney pipes with like all the smoke just like
or like the
by.
Beginning of Les Miserables. You know,
some of y'all have seen that.
Some of you have seen it, and that's Industrial Revolution. Actually,
no, that's earlier.
Oh, that's true. I'm a bad teacher.
North and South. People who watch North and South, you know what I'm talking about.
Okay, so it's basically machinery and creating things on a mass level, which we had never seen before, and it brought with it some concerns and problems.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the economic. What would you call it? Like the sort of economic background of the Industrial Revolution? Like what is the type of economy that is promoting the development of factories and this manufacturing and like selling products that companies are making in order to gain money? And that is capitalism. So capitalism is one style of ordering an economy that is going to create products to sell. People then get capital, they get money from that, and then they're able to use that to purchase other things, right? And so this is a free market economy. And the type of capitalism that is happening in the Industrial Revolution, at least in the beginning, is laissez-faire capitalism. So we've mentioned that before. That word in French means leave alone. And so that means that there is no government regulation to this economy. So people are allowed to start businesses, to found factories, to hire people, to pay them wages in order to do their work so that they can sell their products and make more money. So that's, I guess, basically capitalism. Anything to add to that?
Not really. It's just amassing as much wealth, whether that be through real estate or things or money as you can, and then investing it to gain more capital, which is money or wealth.
Right. So some pros of capitalism would be freedom, would be like enterprise, like entrepreneurship, like creative energy. People being able to use their minds in order to make better and better products to help society. It gives people the freedom to do that without too much, I guess, hindrance from sort of from the government,
from regulations, or people telling them what to do. So there is a free market is a background of capitalism, right? You have to have a free market, the ability to move around, make business wherever you want, move your business. But there's cons to it too.
Right. So some of the cons would be the fact that if you have a lot of money and you have a lot of power, you have, say you own a bunch of factories, you have the ability to employ people. Well, there's people who need jobs, they need to eat, right? And so they need to be able to make a wage. So they come to your factory and they get hired at your factory. Well, maybe they have no other place to go or no other way to make money. And so you just kind of keep them at this low level salary because then you're able to gain more money because you're not paying your workers. Also, if you don't have any regulation, you don't have to worry about people's safety, really. You don't have to worry about the machines in your factory being up to any sort of safety standard or code, which again, makes you not have to spend more money on those things. And so in order to make the most amount of money.
And according to capitalism, qua capitalism, like capitalism in and of itself, that is the goal.
Right.
So like whatever you can do to make more money
as you can.
So you might, if you have no morals, if capitalism is your moral compass, then you end up, people get hurt and pushed down and kept down, right? There is no middle class in these situations where capitalism, laissez-faire capitalism, right? You have people with a lot of money and people who work for the people with a lot of money and are sometimes abused and hurt. That's why you have, think of Charles Dickens. What was that book?
Great Expectations.
Great Expectations.
Yeah.
There's another one too.
There's a lot.
Tale of Two Cities.
A Tale of Two Cities. Yeah, Dickens is writing in the time of the Industrial Revolution, and he's experiencing it. He experienced a lot of the problems that workers experienced because his family was pretty poor. And so a lot of the stuff that's in his novels is kind of bringing out that hardship that people experience. And
I want some more, sir.
Yeah, please. Oliver Twist.
Oliver Twist.
Please, sir, can I have some more? So people are just able to really suffer a lot at the hands of the rich. And so that can cause some issues. So this is sort of, especially laissez-faire capitalism, this is going to cause an emphasis on the individual. So like, if I can get ahead in any way possible, I want to get ahead. And one sort of philosophy that's undergirding that whole movement is social Darwinism. So that's one of your vocab terms as well. So as you know, Darwin is the one who is coming up with the theory of evolution, right? So this is the biological development of creatures over
the strong
a
live,
time.
the weak die. Therefore, strong attributes. Survival of the fittest. The strong end up breeding, and therefore stronger attributes are surpassed the weaker attributes.
Right. So what people did, and this wasn't Darwin himself, but certain people looked at Darwin's findings and they said, oh, this must apply to human beings as well in terms of society. So if I'm a person who has the ability to kind of step on everybody else and get what's mine and be able to get ahead and create, this big business empire, then great, I should do that. And people who are starving in the streets, let them die because they're not as strong as I am. So survival of the fittest, right? Like, I'm the fittest person, so I deserve to survive. And if they can't get ahead on their own, if they don't have enough initiative or hard work or skills or whatever else, then so be it. Just let them die. And so that's the sort of...
which isn't good.
Right. So just
some of y'all might be like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Well, obviously unbridled capitalism or laissez-faire capitalism leads to an abuse of the human dignity, of human beings, right? Because our moral compass isn't just capitalism, right? So people responded to that.
Right. So we believe that even the weak have dignity, right? Like, whether you're weak, whether you're strong, because you're a human person, you're made in the image and likeness of God, and therefore you deserve what you need in order to not only survive, but thrive as a human person. And so if you are in a circumstance where you have weakness, maybe you have a disability, maybe you were born into a family that is impoverished, and there's not a whole lot that you can do in order to get out of that, you still have dignity, right? And so it's up to those of us who have been given a lot in order to help those who haven't. So that's the Catholic Church's view. Now, just really quickly, I want to talk about Darwin, just because we brought up evolution. What does the church have to say about evolution?
First, quiz. What was Darwin's boat's name?
I have no idea.
The Beagle.
That's so random.
The Beagle. The Beagle.
In case you guys don't know, Father Brad is a trivia master. So.
Not the bagel. That is a scrumptious bread product. The Beagle was his ship, the SS Beagle or something. Okay, not the USS, but the SS, whatever. But so evolution. A lot of people have this idea, this false idea, that faith and science are against each other, and that you can't believe in evolution and be a Catholic or a Christian at the same time. And that's actually false. The Catholic Church supports the sciences, has been a patron of the sciences, has given money and time and talent. There's saints or blesseds. Blessed Nicholas Steno was actually some of the foundation of what led to Darwin's discoveries and theories of evolution.
Was he genetics?
No, that was the Augustinian monk Mendel.
Oh, Mendel, right.
So, but Nicholas Steno studied geology, so the stratification of Earth's crust.
Oh, right.
And separated, the Earth is more than 6,000 years old. Genesis isn't a science textbook. It's not telling us how the heavens go. It's telling us how to go to heaven.
Right, and that's a Galileo quote, right?
That's from Galileo.
So we talked about Galileo in the last chapter. So this is something that, again, is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have today about the church, is that the church is somehow anti-science. And there are Christians who would believe that we have to take Genesis so literally that it is like a scientific textbook. And as a church, the Catholic Church, we've never taught that. And so
you know what I say to those Christians? Back off.
Oh my gosh. See what I deal with? Anyways, so evolution is something that we believe God could use or have used in order to create the world, right? So where we are today.
Genesis says God created the world and he used order to do it. And there's nothing more beautifully ordered than this process of secondary causality that God used to unfold creation over billions of years. How beautiful and how awesome. So we should look at, in fact, who was it? I think it's an Einstein quote where he talks about that the laws of physics and the laws of nature almost express to us a third creation account. Where he's you have Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, and he's like, the laws of nature are almost a third creation account. They reveal the order in which God created.
That's really beautiful. So evolution doesn't have to be a threat to faith. There's still a lot of theory surrounding evolution, so there's not everything has been proven about that. So we leave that to the sciences. That's not necessarily a matter of faith, but it's something that we would respond to as a church in the sense of how did God create? Well, the sciences are what tell us that. And then the Bible and the church are there to tell us, okay, how do we understand our relationship to God and one another? And then how do we live in this world that he created and be good stewards of that creation? The next thing is because of all these problems that laissez-faire capitalism is causing, especially for the workers, especially for the poor, there are certain people who are starting to realize that this isn't a perfect system. So there's people like Karl Marx who end up reacting against capitalism and positing a new idea for the order of society and economy, and that he called communism. So this was, again, in reaction to the great suffering of the poor and especially the workers in these factories. And so you want to explain a little bit about what communism is?
Yeah, and I want to say that a lot of you have heard these words, capitalism, you've heard communism, you've heard these things. This is the foundation. This is where it comes from, okay? So this is late 1800s. Karl Marx is saying, okay, if the proletariat or the bourgeoisie, which is the people who own the capital or who own the factories, who are oppressing other people, who are providing good working conditions, all that, if they own the means of production, they own the factories, they own the products, they own the machines and all that, then there's never going to be equality, right? With just a free market, with laissez-faire capitalism. So Marx's idea, which is wrong, is that the proletariat or the lower class, the workers, should violently seize the means of production. So violently take over society and in some senses kill those who have the capital And then give it over to the government, and the government control everything, and there's no free market. The government decides what you get, and everyone gets the same amount. That's basically communism in a nutshell. And you can see this in countries like China in the mid 20th century, so like the 1940s to now.
Right.
and then USSR, the Soviet Union. After World War II, that's what we were fighting. So that's the Cold War was the United States, which was more capitalistic, not laissez-faire, but more capitalistic against communism as it pops up all over the world.
Right. So one of the things about communism is that it is by nature atheistic, which I think I've mentioned before in class. That
Marxist communism.
Right. Marxist communism is atheistic. So he is seeing religion as something that is kind of keeping the little man down, because like, oh, if you have God, then, you should just pray about your situation, and you shouldn't try to rise up at all and like seize control. And so religion is kind of like keeping people down, is what he saw.
You must have never read the Magnificat,
Yeah.
My soul magnifies the Lord, like I am lowly, but he lifts me up on high.
Right. So there's a lot of things that we could talk about with that, and some misunderstandings that Marx had about faith and about religion, and maybe some other people who were religious, like some misunderstandings that they had about their own faith.
I think it would have helped if we just watched some Groucho Marx.
Oh my goodness. You just want to derail.
Yeah, see? Yeah.
Okay.
So you have laissez-faire capitalism on one side, you have Marxism or communism on the other side, and here's the dealio, kids. Usually the truth is found in the tension between two extremes. That's for virtue, and that's also for economics and social doctrine, Catholic social doctrine in particular. So what's the Catholic response? What's the Catholic middle?
Okay, so obviously Marx is responding to real problems, right? He's seeing the workers being oppressed. He's seeing people who are poor basically just being left in the gutter to die. He sees that this is a problem. He understands in a certain way the equality of humanity, and he wants everybody to be treated equally. So we can get on board with some things like that. The stuff that we can't get on board with is completely removing religion from society, and also the encouragement to violent rebellion, right? Because violence is just going to lead to more violence. It's just going to actually divide the classes even more, right? If we respond in violence to someone, their reaction is going to be to respond in a defensive violence maybe towards us. And so it just continues the cycle of violence. So this isn't a problem, and it's not a fix-all. I mean, it is a problem, and it's not a fix-all. So Marx and his communism isn't going to work either. So there's got to be some sort of middle ground. Basically, you have on one side capitalism that is emphasizing the individual so much that the community suffers. And then you have Marx on the other side, who is emphasizing the community so much that the individual might suffer. And so these are both problems. So there's got to be some sort of middle ground, some sort of way that we can organize our economy that is actually going to help both the community as a whole and each individual person in that community. All right, so a lot of the principles of Catholic social teaching, which end up being developed over the next century and a half, so in the late 1800s into the 1900s and then today, you have tons of popes and theologians who are writing about these things and writing encyclicals, which are papal letters that are sent to the whole church, specifically addressing these topics of economics and society. And so there's several principles of Catholic social teaching, which I had you guys explore on the USCCB website. And a couple of the things that are important that we mentioned are solidarity and subsidiarity. So what's solidarity mean?
Solidarity is the connectedness of all human persons and our care for the dignity of the human person. So that we are in solidarity with, or we're in union with all other people, no matter their race, socioeconomic status.
And we have a responsibility to help them. So again, if we have more things at our disposal, if we have riches, if we have wealth, if we have power, that we should use that not to the service of the individual ourselves, but to the service of society as a whole and to those people who have less than we do. And then the second principle we mentioned was subsidiarity, which is?
The principle that we should handle things at the lowest level possible. So an idea of this would be like decisions should be made about children first at the level of the family, right? So parents have a responsibility and a right to make decisions about their own children because that's the lowest level. It's the base unit of society. And then you go up from there if there's other things that need to be taken into account. So it's against a government saying, you have to do this with your kid, you have to teach them this, you have to... No, principle of subsidiarity, handle things in the lowest common denominator in the lowest level. Jesus talks about this when he says, hey, if you have a problem with your brother, don't come to the church first, go to him. Don't go gossip in the town. Subsidiarity. Go to him first. Y'all handle it together. If that doesn't work, then go up the ladder of authority.
Right. So I think...
Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So subsidiarity, lowest level, right? So we want, for example, I think I mentioned this in class. If you have say a certain population of homeless in your city, and there's some problem, some economic problem, or some, I don't know, other kind of social problem that is causing this homelessness to abound in your city, the first question shouldn't be like, hey, federal government, what should you do about this? The first question should be like, okay, we as a city, like the city of Baton Rouge, we have this problem of homelessness. How are we going to pool our resources here locally in order to help solve this problem? So that can be intellectual resources, that can be physical resources, money, it can be programs that we're starting.
Usually it has to do with mental illness and drugs.
Right. So how are we dealing with those problems right here locally? And so the first way that we deal with that is in the local society. We lean on certain charities and charitable organizations that are local first before we go to the highest level. Now, if a local society, a local city, say, doesn't have a lot of resources, doesn't have the ability locally to deal with the problem, then you move up the ladder, right, to the next possible, maybe like the state level. Maybe the state can help our certain city. So anyway, subsidiarity, starting at the lowest level first and then moving up the chain. Okay, so Pope Leo the 13th is the first pope that I want to highlight in this section. So he's technically the first pope of the 20th century because he dies in 1903. So he's 1878 to 1903. That was his papacy. So he was the one that wrote Rerum Novarum, which was the first document on Catholic social teaching. It's sort of the landmark bedrock document that's talking about a lot of these problems. He's directly addressing industrialization, capitalism, communism. He's talking about, is he communism or is Marx later?
Marx at the same time. I don't know if he directly addressed it. Rerum Novarum, a lot is about the right of personal
rights of
property.
Workers and personal property. Yeah, so that's another thing that communism doesn't allow for is personal property.
So he is addressing communism in that sense.
So even just like the principles of it. Okay, and so he is sort of our main guy here that is setting this foundation for Catholic social teaching throughout the next century and a half up until today. So all of the other documents that came after Rerum Novarum were kind of hearkening back to what Leo had originally said.
You know how I know he wasn't lying when he wrote his encyclical?
How?
Because he's Leo the lion. Okay, that's bad.
Okay, so a couple of other things that he did is he actually wrote, I didn't know this until yesterday, he wrote 11 encyclicals on the rosary. So he's sometimes called the Rosary Pope. So he had a big devotion to Mary. Did you know that?
I didn't. That's crazy.
And then the other thing is that he was seen as being a little bit more open to dialogue with the modern world than his predecessor, who was Blessed Pope Pius IX, who we talked about in the last chapter. So remember, Pius IX was the one who had the papal states seized from him. He was the one that felt like a prisoner in the Vatican. He was very opposed to the modern developments of society because he saw so much violence and so much revolution. And we talked about that was actually ending up causing a lot more problems for society than he saw solutions. And so he was the one that was sort of retreating away from that.
So you could remember it like this: Pius the Ninth, like no to the world. And then Leo the 13th, like Leo the constellations, like open to the universe.
Interesting. Okay, so that's a good way to remember it. So Leo is a little
even
bit
though
more
Pius
open.
IX was really cool.
Yeah, he was.
He was like
super
super
Yeah.
joyful. He was
Pio
no.
Yeah, no means 9. So anyways, Leo was a little bit more open. He was a little bit more willing to at least have a dialogue or a conversation with these modern ideas. And so he was kind of taking them a little bit more seriously and kind of trying to mull over them and think about them and be like, okay, what in this can actually go along with our Catholic understanding of the world and society, and what part of this cannot? And let's actually try to be a little bit more specific and parse out all these details. So that's what Leo was all about. Okay, the second pope in this time period is his successor, who is Saint Pius X. Pius X was well known for doing a lot of things with the liturgy. So that's the Mass and the sacraments. So he was the one that actually lowered the communion age to the age of reason, so that people who were 7 years old-ish would be able to receive their first communion. So before that, it was a little bit older. So you had to wait a little bit longer before you could receive the Eucharist. He also encouraged a more frequent reception of communion, right? So he wanted us to be able to receive communion more often. In his time period, there were people who would sort of shy away from receiving the Eucharist, because really, I think a lot of them saw it as this great gift that it actually is, and they felt unworthy, right? The reality is that all of us are unworthy to receive the Lord, but he gives himself anyway. So as long as we're in a state of grace, as long as we're not in a state of mortal sin, we should be able to receive the Eucharist, and we should receive the Eucharist. So he was encouraging that. Okay, a couple of other things he did was he codified canon law. So canon law, how would you describe that in a sentence?
Well, if a country has a constitution, has a set of laws, the church has that as well. And so it's the church's rules for operating. How do things happen? You can't just have a humongous international organization like the church and not have some laws in place. So it's the church's constitution and laws.
Right. So that's separate and distinct from the moral law, right? So the moral law is like 10 Commandments, like the teachings of the church, things like that. That's going to be very different. So canon law will change as society changes and as the church's like organizational structure sort of changes practically, okay, but not theologically. Mm-hmm. All right. So he gave us, is that the most recent, the 1917 Code of Canon Law?
No. 1982.
82 is most
in
recent.
In the 80s, yeah.
Okay. All right. So another thing that Pope Pius X did and was famous for was really strongly combating modernism. Okay. So modernism is, well, he called it the synthesis of all heresy, which is pretty intense. But basically, it's sort of this overarching idea that whatever is new in society, whatever is new in the world, like these sort of new ideas, new philosophies, new ways of organizing society and culture, when these things are coming up, that like they must be the best thing because they're the new thing, right? Mm-hmm. So they must be better than what has happened in the past. And so he is,
which is false,
right? He's fighting
not
back
necessarily, but it's not necessarily true,
right?
You got Chuck Berry, you got Post Malone. You make the decision.
If you actually got that, let me know. Okay, so anyway, so some stuff that is new is better, but some stuff that is new is not necessarily better. And in fact, it can be really harmful and destructive to society. And so Pope Pius X was like, hey, pump the brakes a little bit. Let's hold back and actually examine these new philosophies and these new ideas and see where maybe they might be good, but also maybe they might not be good for society. So one thing about the church is that the church is trying to be sort of like far looking, like into the future and also into the past to determine like, have we been here before? Have these ideas come up before? Have they actually caused problems or helped people? And so we need to just take them a little bit more seriously before we just wholesale say, yeah, everything's great, it's new, it's trendy, it's what we need to do because everybody's doing it, and so it must be the best thing. So that was something that a lot of his papacy was dedicated to fighting against modernism. I think that's it.
That's it.
For section 1.
Wash your hands.
Do it.
Social distancing.